Dear English readers of the 21st century, this book is a translated edition of Boku no Amuto wa Kanji ga Yomaru, which itself is a translation from the original 23rd century Japanese novel Kanji Yomo Amuto, by Jin Amos. In the story, kanji characters are a prominent feature, and although the main character is unable to read them, the original translator assumed that the reader can read kanji. In a number of places, therefore, I have left the original kanji, or Japanese, and provided parenthetical translations for the benefit of English readers. Also, in order to maintain some of the authenticity of the original 23rd century work, I have incorporated a number of features of 23rd century English grammar such as honorifics, san, koan, and forms of address like sensei and oniai-chan. In order to distinguish between sections and words which were left in the original 23rd century Japanese, I have used all capital letters, and have done my best to approximate the orthodox literary style within the confines of 21st century English. The English translator. Dear people of the 21st century, this book is a retitled and translated edition of Lilsis Read Kanji, by Jin Amos, which was published in the 23rd century. This translation is not literal, and it has been adjusted in order to be more easily readable by 21st century readers. It is important I explain about my use of kanji in the translation. This is a first-person story, narrated by a main character who cannot read kanji, and yet I have used kanji in this translation. All of these kanji, which was published in interpretive translation of the original kanji-less text. In the original work, kanji are only used in a very few select places. And with that, I would like to give my warmest thanks to the original author, Mr. Jin Amos, as well as the many other people involved. Without your cooperation and hard work, this edition would not have been possible. The Translator. Chapter 1: Sensei's Literature. My little sister can read kanji, and that's really quite amazing. I was riding on a train to Tokyo. Fujisan was visible from the window, but only for a brief moment before it disappeared from my sight. There was hardly any time to enjoy the scenery given the incredible speeds of current-day trains. I turned from the window and looked forward. Facing me in the opposite box seat was a girl with long hair. It was my sister, Kuroha. Kuroha was fully absorbed in reading a book. I wondered what she might be reading, so I decided to check the cover. Collection of Web Novels Volume 11, The Haughty and Miiihoup Original Text Version. Yikes! I wasn't able to read the kanji on the cover, but thanks to the phonetic readings written above them, I understood what type of book it was. It was an original text version of an old modern literature novel, which was written using a lot of kanji. She was always reading that sort of difficult ancient literature. What? Kuroha noticed me staring and raised her head. With those piercing eyes of hers, she saw right through me. I was just thinking how amazing you are, being able to read such a difficult book and all that. Web novels are actually some of the easier works to read from that era. Well, no normal person could read them, that's for sure. As I spoke, I took a second look at Kuroha. My eyes first stopped at her long, combed black hair. It looked soft, and it gleamed. Her face was perfectly defined, with balanced eyes, eyebrows, and nose placed precisely on her face. Even as her older brother, I had to admit her beauty was flawless. From the neck down, her slim, well-proportioned body was clad in a classic style, a white blouse, and a necktie, combined with a plaid skirt. It was one of those outfits made to look like an old-fashioned high school uniform. Her legs were fully covered in black pantyhose, but that wasn't for the sake of fashion. She wore them for another reason. Nothing very important, however. She was 16, 1 year younger than me. She was often mistaken for being older, because she looked and acted quite mature. This tended to upset her, and if you told her beautiful people look younger as they get older, she would give you a nasty look for some reason. Kuroha's gaze returned to her book. You sure can read all those kanji. I couldn't help but be impressed. The current-day Japanese we used didn't have any kanji characters. Kanji had been used in modern literature, i.e. literature from the latter half of the 19th century until the latter half of the 21st century. Shortly after that period they fell into disuse. Everybody used to be able to read them in the past, you know. That's what I've heard, but still, it's not like reading kanji is a skill you can use in normal daily life. I feel it's important to carry on the literary traditions," said Kuroha, her face expressionless. "It really would be better if you could read at least a few kanji, Oniai-chan. Wouldn't they be useful if you wanted to write a period drama that felt authentic? Those little details are important." "Well, I don't have any intention of writing anything like that right now. I wrote, of course." That was what she was referring to. "My dream was to eventually become a professional novelist. I had taken a stab at memorizing some kanji before, but I had barely even scratched the surface." She was right. If I could read and write kanji, that would definitely give me an advantage in writing stories set in the past. Back then, people had actually used kanji in their daily lives, so that would be crucial for a work's authenticity. At any rate, Kuroha was once again immersed in her book. What should I do? Maybe I should ponder good ideas for a novel. Without much thought, my gaze wandered toward the screen mounted on the wall in the front of the train, where news headlines were scrolling past. Miiihoup Shoujo statue excavated. The scroll went on to explain that a full-body statue of a magical girl created 200 years ago had been discovered in Tokyo. It would be kept at the Agency for Cultural Affairs after it had been carefully examined. It seemed the pink costume she was wearing identified her as the main character of a series called Magical Girl Super Sadie. Looks like they found that magical girl statue that's been in the news. They say it's worth 50 billion yen. I see, Kuroha replied, not even looking up from her book. She didn't seem to have any interest in it, despite it being a cultural artifact worth 50 billion yen. The news headlines continued. Yusubai nominate for Homura. What? At first, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. The Homura Prize is the most prestigious literary award in Japan. There's no way they could have nominated a book like Yusubai for that. Hey, what's the matter, Oniai-chan, said Kuroha, looking at me in puzzlement. Huh? Oh, I realized that I had stood up without thinking. I came to my senses and sat back down. It said Yusubai was nominated for the Homura Prize. I've read that one. It's made quite a stir recently. A book like that isn't worthy of the Homura Prize. Yusubai was a daring, unconventional work which had really turned heads. What was so different about it? The writing style. Yusubai didn't use or its symbols. Considering current-day Japanese, that was a considerably daring choice. The story also challenged convention. It told the quiet story of a middle-aged main character all the way to old age. There were no sudden twists or ups and downs, just stories of that person's everyday life. The theme was growing old. There were no beautiful women or beautiful girls or beautiful little girls, and no panty flashes, either. For a current-day work, this is clearly taking literature in a bad direction. Personally, I think that Odaira Sensei's Lilsis star deserves to win. That would definitely be an archetypical example of the orthodox style. Exactly. The Homura Prize should go to traditional, orthodox literature. But Kuroha didn't look pleased, so I pressed on. What, you're saying you don't think Lilsis star is good? I wouldn't say it's bad, but doesn't it just repeat the usual pattern? It's the same as all of Odaira Sensei's other books, you know, with the main character gaining a non-blood-related little sister. I had stood up again. But this time I had stood up with a purpose. That is exactly what makes it an Odaira Sensei book. How dare you insult the orthodox style? Kuroha shrugged her shoulders ever so slightly. It was times like these I was disgusted with her perfect little face. Doesn't Lilsis star have a number of innovative new plot ideas? Like the little sister's old-fashioned code of honor. In that scene where she's in big trouble in the game of strip, rock, paper, scissors, she thinks outside the box and takes off all her clothes ahead of time. She wins with the element of surprise. Why would she just get naked like that? Besides, the whole strip rock paper scissors thing came out of nowhere. There was no reason behind it. Ah, how pitiful. Kuroha, you are very intelligent. But you have zero sense for literature. It's a primary tenet of the orthodox literary style that there be a scene with meaningless nudity, yes? The strip rock paper scissors was there to provide a nude situation. I could have read that book left, right, or upside down, and it still would have seemed completely inconsistent to me. You are focusing too much on picky details. It was crucial that they play strip rock paper scissors and get naked. That's what makes it true literature. I will never be able to understand the type of people who enjoy such logic. How dare you say that? Throwing up my hands at Kuroha's blasphemy, I plunked back down into my seat. Honestly, you don't have nearly enough respect for Odera Sensei. Why did you even come with me today? The two of us were on this train to Tokyo for a very important reason. We were going to meet the great author Guy Odera. Born in 2132, he was a currently 70-year-old veteran author whose debut work had been published 50 years ago. Every book he put out was a record-breaking hit. He was not only the top author in Japan, but he also had tons of passionate fans overseas. It was said that he was the most widely read author in the world. I was, of course, just a normal high school student. I had no right to be able to meet a man like that, but a relative of mine who worked at a publishing company had arranged it for me. Odera Sensei was the current-day author I respected the most. And I had the opportunity to meet him at his home in Tokyo. It was supposed to just be me going to Tokyo, but my little sister Kuroha had tagged along. It's not like she's a fan of his or anything, so why? Maybe she just wants to meet a famous person. I would have preferred to go alone. I didn't have any other plans. No plans? Don't you have any friends? Maybe I should go to your classroom and yell out, "Please everyone, be nicer to my dear little sister." Don't even think about it. If you do that, both you and I are dead. Dead? I'll be dead to society, and you'll be clinically dead. Why would I be clinically dead? Because I will have killed you, that's why. Whoa, chill out there. I have some friends, okay? Don't do anything rash. Then why aren't you hanging out with them? Call it a personal prerogative. Preroga, what? A little sister's perquisite. Please don't use fancy words to trick your big brother. I thought I was dumbing it down for you. She thinks that's dumbing it down? I have even less idea what she's talking about. Kuroha muttered disappointedly to herself, then continued. I was worried you might do something to insult Odera Sensei. So I'm here to look after you. Look after me? Ah, I see now. Kuroha did tend to look out for me. I see. So you still think of me as a child. Thank you. I grabbed both of Kuroha's book-filled hands with gratitude in my heart. Hey, stop that. Kuroha pulled her hands back in surprise. But I would be happier as your brother if you would appreciate Odera Sensei's books a little more. Odera's books are all romantic comedies with Jimai. Non-blood related little sisters, right? That's kind of. Kuroha started to curl her long black hair in her fingers. It was a habit of hers when she got embarrassed. Yeah, I didn't know what she was thinking exactly, but I decided to say exactly what was on my mind. Jimai sure are great. Why yes, she said, looking downwards for some reason. 2D1s, anyway. Kuroha looked up and gave me the evil eye. Come on. I can't believe you can say that about Jimai, given your situation. My situation, huh? But that was precisely why I could empathize so well. I didn't answer, and Kuroha started looking a little apologetic. I'm sorry, that was inconsiderate. Don't worry about it. Anyway, we're almost there. The overhead speakers announced that we would be arriving shortly at Shinagawa Station. In only a brief time, I'll get to meet Odera Sensei. I was so overcome with joy that I became lightheaded. After getting off the train at Shinagawa, we transferred to a different train to head toward Odaira Sensei's house. The last stop on our way was called Nerima Station. After leaving Nerima Station, we headed to the Rotary, and were met with an absolutely huge government billboard. It was filled with an illustration of the current 2D Prime Minister, the adorable Naimo-chan. Her big eyes are so cute. Naimo-chan was the 7th 2D Prime Minister. Her concept was that she was the people's Jitsumai, blood-related little sister, and she was backed with overwhelming support from the Jitsumai wing of the party. Even I loved her, despite being part of the Jimai, non-blood-related little sister, wing. Below the billboard, an electronic sign displayed a message from Naimo-chan, Japan, be happy. Now then, Sensei's house should be near the station. I looked around the area. As I did, a large, chalk white house came into view on one of the city corners. There it is, that's his house. I gulped in anticipation. My nerves had finally gotten to me. I must be careful not to be impolite. Feeling flustered, I buttoned up my collar. I was suddenly worried about what I was wearing. I tended to wear old-school style clothing, just like Kuroha, but I had different tastes. I was wearing a black jacket and pants, in a style that was called student uniform. I had heard that in the Showa era, young men who wished to become authors would wear the student uniform style with pride. Kuroha, do you think what I'm wearing is rude to Odaira Sensei? I'm wondering if I come off as too cool and intelligent. I wouldn't worry about that. No matter what you wear, you wouldn't come across as cool or intelligent. Quite the contrary, in fact. Or intelligent. Oh good, quite the contrary. As we approached Sensei's house, I began to see that the surrounding white wall had illustrations on it. They were pictures of girls. 1, 2, all 20 looked like they were in elementary school. I knew every single one of them. Little sisters, one and all. Since Odaira Sensei's debut work, all of his books had featured young little sisters, without exception. Those 20 girls were the heroines of his 20 most famous works. How many can you recognize, Kuroha? You mean, tell apart from each other? I can tell Lil's star's main character, Rin, but I win. I know all of them. I was an Odaira true believer. Of course I could recognize the illustrations of all his heroines. They all look the same to me. She has so much to learn. It was true that they were all elementary school students with twin-tailed hairstyles and a cute ribbon with the same perfectly proportioned prepubescent body. Superficially they did resemble one another. But I wanted her to look more closely. Each one had their own unique trait. A mole near their mouth, or hair that was 1 centimeter longer than the others, or the color of the ribbon. To me they were all completely different. It's not just their looks. They all have the same personality as well. That's not even close to the truth. If I had to list the similarities, it would have been limited to tending to beg for things, easily getting lonely, being easily embarrassed, putting up a strong front, easily getting jealous, being clumsy, still having bedwetting issues, saying mysterious things sometimes, and being madly in love with her older brother. That's hardly similar at all. After all, it wasn't like he just wrote characters that were exactly his own ideal of a little sister. Each time, they had their own character. I wonder if I can't tell the books apart, because all the heroines are similar? Why, you one of these days, that mouth of yours will be your downfall. Even if you put aside the question of the heroine, the main characters in each work were all totally different from each other. The little sisters were always 10 years old, but the main characters were always the same age as Odaira Sensei when he wrote the book, getting steadily older. So in his latest work, Lil's Star, the main character was 70 years old. Tell me you weren't moved by the scene where she helps put in his dentures. Don't just focus on the characters by themselves. You should think about the relationship between the main character and the little sister. Sure, whatever. What's with that attitude of hers? If you keep making fun of me like that, I'm gonna get angry at you for real. And who might you be? head had appeared from behind the gate. I would remember those as the first words he had ever spoken to me. He looked at us with some suspicion. It's really him. There he was, the real Vietuber, standing before me. He looked exactly like his author portrait. He had a head of white hair and a nice-looking beard to match, and wore a pair of classic black-rimmed glasses. I could see his eyes behind the lenses, sharp and dignified. How do you do? My name is Jinamos. I used my full name to introduce myself. As I did, he began to stroke his beard and looked up to the side as if in thought. Was I scheduled to have a visitor today? Oh no. Could there have been a mix-up in the scheduling? Sensei looked at us doubtfully, but... Could you excuse me for a second? Furling his brows, he placed his hand up to his ear. As if listening to someone's voice, he nodded in confirmation. Perhaps he had a small communications device in his ear. Sorry about that. I seem to have forgotten, but my little sister remembered for me. Yes, that's right. It was today. Sensei began to smile welcomingly, and opened his arms toward us. Seems like he's inviting us in, that's a relief. This is my little sister, Kuroha. I adjusted myself to one side and introduced my sister, who was standing behind me. Nice to meet you. I'm Kuroha. Ooh. A little sister. Sensei's eyes quickly narrowed. She is your jitsumai, I take it? I took a deep breath. Why would he ask a question like that? Is she my jitsumai? Well, actually... No. Kuroha and I are not related by blood. That was the truth. My birth parents had put me in foster care soon after I was born, and I had been adopted by my new family. It wasn't something I liked to talk about with people. A jimai, you say? He almost snarled at us. Huh? Sensei was clearly behaving oddly. His shoulders were almost shaking. You dared to bring your jimai to see me, the man that is known as Jimai Odaira? He stared at me with eyes that told me I was his enemy. Was it your parents remarrying? No, I was adopted when I was a baby. That is pretty rare indeed. And with a little sister involved, to boot. Sorry, his fervor was enough to make me instinctively apologize. Sensei caught himself and his expression softened. My apologies. It's not like I'm jealous of you or anything. Please, come inside. It looked like he had calmed down. He opened the door and gestured for us to come on in. After excusing myself, I went to step inside. Hold it right there, he said in a low voice, bringing me to a standstill right before I entered. I'd like to check something. Is she your only little sister? Such a sharp mind. I almost shook because of how perceptive he was. No, I have another one. And how old is this other little sister? 10 years old. 10 years old? His face twisted into a freaky smile. Don't tell me that you've been asked to help her when she's wet the bed. Yes, I have. She was worried that if she told our parents or Kuroha, she'd get yelled at. There was a loud bam. Sensei had kicked the door. Oh. His face was turning more and more red. It seemed like any moment, steam would come out. A 10-year-old little sister that wets the bed. Tears were streaming down his cheeks, and he took something out of his pocket that looked like a cell phone. Hello? Is this Chimabayashi? This is Odaira. He began to speak, as we stood there in stunned silence. There's a boy I'd like you to return to a baby. What in the world is he talking about? He's got 2 jimai, and one of them is 10 years old. Can you believe it? I don't think I can take it. Return him back to being a baby, and then they'll all be his older sisters. As he was speaking, I had a revelation. Chimabayashi, could that be Professor Chimabayashi, the scientist? She was a genius, and had had a string of successful never-before-seen experiments. As Sensei hung up, he looked at me with a slight grin. But his eyes were dead serious. Jin-kun, you might get a chance to experience something no human has before. You can contribute to the progress of science. An experience no human has experienced before. The progress of science. Kuroha. I looked at her gleefully. Perhaps she wasn't able to grasp what was going on, as she had completely stiffened up. I'm so honored. I cried. I was going to experience something extraordinary. I was sure it would be a wonderful source of inspiration for my novels. Sensei. I threw myself upon the ground before him. Here was a man who should be gazed upon only from below. I have many good friends. They are all top class in their fields. Sensei stared at me, tears in his eyes. That includes politicians, and I'll have them institute a Jimai tax. And I won't exempt minors, either. Jimai are the ultimate luxury, after all. And such luxury should be taxed accordingly. Magnificent, thanks to our meeting today, Sensei, all of society will change. This was indeed a miraculous encounter. You're mocking me, aren't you? Of course not. I am truly overjoyed. I might be able to come up with an idea for my novel that will win the newcomer's prize if I have this incredible experience. Thank you so much. With anger in his voice, he pounced. Newcomer's prize? What nonsense. You have angered me. I will make sure no publisher ever allows you to debut. Consider your road to being an author blocked. Sensei's words ran on repeat in my head. My road to being an author blocked? Before I had even realized it, his mood had completely soured. His influence spread throughout the entire literary world, so it would be trivial for him to stop me from being published. At this rate, I'll never become a novelist. I was about to fall into complete despair. Wait a moment. Kuroha rushed in front of me as I lay on the ground, her black hair swinging back and forth. I know you must be angry, but please look at this. Kuroha took out her cell phone and showed the display to him. This is my little sister Miru. Judging from what she said, I gathered she was showing him a picture of Miru. If you can calm your anger, we will bring her here and make her call you Oniai-chan. The second she said that, he froze. Oh. Sensei smiled as if in a dream. Oniai-chan, I like the sound of that. His mouth was half open, and drool was flowing out. He was an elderly man. So perhaps he suffered from an inability to control his mouth muscles properly. Must be difficult for him. He stood there for a moment, out of it, but then he quickly straightened his face. It's a promise, he shouted, pointing straight at Kuroha. But let's not talk outside all day. Come on in, he said, seemingly having regained his composure. He spun around and headed into the house. Phew, looks like I dodged a bullet there. Thank you very much. Come on, Oniai-chan, stand up already. As I stood, Kuroha leaned over and whispered in my ear. I only said we'd bring Miru to see him to get out of that situation, okay? I wasn't being serious. You what? You shouldn't be tricking him. If I hadn't said something, he would have kept boiling over like that. Your dream was this close to being crushed. See, I knew it was a good idea for me to come. Maybe I should have been thankful that Kuroha had come along. I started to get a little choked up. Thanks to Kuroha coming along with me, I was. Kuroha left me to my deep thoughts, and went inside. Hey. No fair, you get to go in first. I'm the huge fan of his, after all. We were led to a simply decorated living room with white walls, and a white table in the middle. Kuroha and I sat down next to each other on the couch. So you are an aspiring author, Jin-kun? Yes, I replied. I reached into the bag I was carrying, and took out a bundle of manuscripts. Actually, I brought some of my work with me, and was hoping you would read it. Sensei nodded in acknowledgement, and immediately turned to look at the pages as I handed them over. I can't believe that Odaira Sensei is reading my manuscripts. This is like a dream. After a little while absorbed in reading, he raised his head. Is this written in code? He asked me, looking thoroughly confused. It's almost completely incoherent. Especially the symbol. What in the world is that supposed to mean? It's a pictogram of the heroine running happily with her hands spread out. Sensei was at a loss for words. Jin-kun, you may be the genius we need to break through to the next era of literature. Genius? Oh my god. Odaira Sensei called me a genius. I was completely on cloud 9. Sorry, Kuroha grimaced slightly and glanced downward. Huh? Why are you apologizing? I'd like to read the rest soon. Well, if I can read it. Thank you so much. And could I trouble you for some advice on writing novels? Advice, you say? Sensei thought to himself for a brief moment, and then pulled out an article of clothing from under the table. It was a pair of white panties with a tiny ribbon. I doubted they were made for a woman. More like a 10-year-old girl. What do you think these are? Panties. That would seem to be the case. Sensei turned to Kuroha and asked her, and what do you see, Kuroha-kun? Kuroha stiffened up and replied, I also see a pair of women's underwear. Exactly. Both of you observed reality. In other words, you explained. But a novel that only consists of explaining is not enjoyable. A novel must describe. Describe? Yes, you cannot just write panties when there are a pair of panties. You must describe them in a way which captures their essence. For me, I would write a miniature universe in white. A miniature universe. I would have never thought of that. You must develop your expressive potential every day, he said as he put the panties on his head. Why did he do that? There doesn't seem to be any logical connection. I think I get it. After some thought I understood where he was going. Odaira Sensei wanted me to describe him wearing panties on his head. Okay. I'll think of a description right away. But all that sat before me was a gentleman wearing a pair of panties on his head. I need to think of something stylish and poetic. Degenerate, muttered Kuroha beside me. Why, you how rude to call him a degenerate. Her description also hardly rose beyond simply explaining what she saw. It wasn't even close to the awesomeness of miniature universe in white. At least throw in a peerless before degenerate. Sheesh. As we racked our brains, he sat there grinning with those panties on his head, staring at us. So we have an adopted older brother and his Jemai? It's just like the situation in Oniaka. Oniaka, he says. The full title was Oni-chan no Aka-chan Yumitai, which meant I want to have Oni-chan's child. It was the great master Kuronagura's legendary bestseller that had been published in 2060. A landmark work in Little Sister literature, it had given birth to the spread of Mo and the orthodox literary style. According to researchers, it had not only had a huge effect on literature, but on Japanese culture as a whole. My personal history was very similar to the main character in Oniaka. We had both been given up for adoption, and gained a little sister. Oniaka was the novel which inspired me to become a novelist, I explained. Oh, I see. To me, Oniaka was no normal book. Thanks to Oniaka, I had been able to get over my pain of being adopted when I was a child. The first time I had read it, my feelings for the main heroine, Homura Taiti, had moved my heart. I felt like the sun had finally shone down upon my world. Homura will be my favorite heroine for eternity. She is beautiful and admirable, yes. If only she'd been 6 or 7 years younger, he replied, eyes narrowing. Homura was 16 years old in the book. I couldn't help but discuss my favorite book. The opening scene was excellent, don't you think? As soon as her brother appeared, there was a gust of wind that blew up her skirt, starting things off with a panty flash. And afterward, it threw in more panty flashes now and then. Wasn't it neat that you could tell what Homura was thinking based on the pattern on her panties? Yes. But there is another meaning to the panty flashes in that work, you know. Another meaning, you say? Homura's panties also represented the sign of the times when it was written. Sign of the times? In the first part, Homura was wearing completely red panties, yes? They represented the suffering the Japanese citizens felt under a crushing tax burden. Gura, the author, wanted to speak out and proclaim, the people are being bled dry and suffering. I had no idea. How frustrating. It seemed like my skills of literary analysis still had a long ways to go. A normal reader doesn't need to read that much into it. Homura is so cute, is enough for most. I was a person who aimed to become an author. I can't just settle for satisfying normal readers. Kuroha, we just heard something amazing. You have to read Oniaka, too. I said, looking at Kuroha. I was getting excited after learning of this entirely new way of reading my beloved story. I hear you, she replied coolly. Kuroha loved reading, but she had never read Oniaka. I wonder if there is some reason she doesn't want to read it. It's such a shame. Kuroha, why won't you read Oniaka? Homura is totally the best. I don't understand how a fictional character can be the best. Maybe Kuroha-kun wants to read it less every time you describe how great Homura is, Jin-kun. Kuroha blurted out, that's not it, and started to pout. Ha ha ha. Well, it was definitely that work that accelerated the spread of Mo culture. Japan was now the land of Mo, but it apparently hadn't always been that way in the past. Although, lately there's something out of the ordinary getting some attention. Odaira Sensei quipped, but quickly his expression turned serious. Have you read Yusabai? It seemed like he was also pained by what he had read in that book. I read it. It's definitely something new, but I wouldn't call it. There isn't a single female character in it. And no panty flashes or scenes with stripping, either. The author of Yusabai seems determined to challenge the idiom, without panties, there is no literature. I could totally understand why he was so infuriated. How could he not be? And to think that book, of all books, would be nominated for the Homura Prize. The Homura Prize was named in honor of Homura Tadai, the heroine of Oniaka, and was the most prestigious literary award in Japan. Any published book was eligible, and each year a book in the orthodox, Mo style was nominated. And yet, this year this strange book, Yusabai, had somehow snuck itself a nomination. For literary folk such an Odaira Sensei. And myself, we couldn't help but lament the situation. But for a heretic like Kuroha, personally think it's refreshing to have a book where the girl doesn't show her panties. What a horribly uncultured thing to say. Oh, so you think that Yusabai is worthy of the Homura Prize, Kuroha-kun? I'm not sure I would go that far, but for me, I think my main competition for the prize is my rival Haruka-kun's book My Little Sister Can't Go to the Bathroom Alone, Odaira Sensei said. He was referring to Haruka Sensei, another big-name author. Considered two sides of the same coin of the Little Sister literary world, they were known as Jimai Odaira and Jitsumai Haruka respectively. Despite its archaic-sounding title, My Little Sister Can't Go to the Bathroom Alone was the epitome of a current-day novel. The description of the heroine trying valiantly to hold it in made for a very easy read. What did you think of that book, Kuroha-kun? He added. Kuroha responded with silence, and did not look pleased. I was well aware of the reason why Kuroha wasn't able to answer the question. My Little Sister Can't Go to the Bathroom Alone is basically the story of Kuroha when she was little, I said. As Kuroha's face went flush with embarrassment, she glared at me. I remembered those days. When Kuroha had been little, she wouldn't go to the bathroom by herself. If Mom and Dad weren't home, she would ask, Oniai-chan, come with me. And make me follow her to the bathroom door. You might not be able to tell now, but Kuroha had a time when she was actually cute, you know. Will you stop it already? Why can't you learn to keep your mouth shut? Kuroha complained, her face now red as a ripe tomato. I will state my opinion. I must give Haruka Sensei credit for his ability to write a book with that subject matter. But I do think his nomination was a radical choice. Yes, that book almost went into the realm of philosophy. It's definitely a work of the crazy, radical Haruka-kun of old. It brings me back, really back when we were younger, Haruka-kun, and I would have some lively arguments in the literary hangout bars in Shinjuku's Golden Gai. In the literary magazines, the battle between Jitsumai fans and Jumai fans had raged on without end. Ever since Odaira Sensei and Haruka Sensei had debuted, they'd been destined to be rivals for eternity. I was certain that Odaira Sensei had no interest in losing to Haruka Sensei when it came to literary prizes. Your Lilsa's star is a shoo-in to win, Sensei. It is the most orthodox of all the books that were nominated, so don't worry. Thank you. It's one of my best works, if I do say so myself. My little sisters also say it's very good. Kuroha looked like something was off when he said that. I've been wondering since you mentioned them earlier, but are your little sisters at home? Yes, they're here. All 20 of them. Huh? He tapped his head. They live in here. From my debut works Azu to my latest books Rin, he said, putting a hand up to his ear. He must be listening to his little sisters. In an interview, he had once said that he often communicated with his little sisters. So that's what he meant by that. Uh-oh. Azu is acting very jealous. She doesn't like it when I swoon over beautiful ladies like you, Kuroha-kun. Ew. Kuroha's face turned a slight shade of blue. Azu's been my little sister for 50 years now, and she still doesn't understand me. What a troublemaker she is. She should know that high schoolers are out of my range by now. Just in case, I want to clarify something. You are saying you won't go after kids like me? No, that's backwards. You're way too old. I am not old. Don't get mad at him. I thought he's saying you're a beautiful lady, is all. He put his hand up to his ear once again, and began to smile and nod. Oh, you need to go wee. Let's go to the bathroom, then, he said, standing up. Probably should change these out. Odaira Sensei took off the panties on his head as he left the room. After he was gone, Kuroha looked at me with an exhausted expression. So, his little sisters are always 10 years old, right? Yup. They're all 10. Do 10-year-olds say wee? Why not? It's very common for 2-year-olds, so this gap gives them a unique personality. Kuroha had no response to this. Instead, she said, what do you think of Odaira Sensei, now that you see him acting this way? You really ask the strangest questions. He's a hentai, I said. Kuroha looked a bit relieved. Yeah, that's also what I think. A hentai genius, that is. What? Being called a hentai is a compliment, you know. I must take this opportunity to learn his amazing ways. Absolutely no way. Kuroha said with such force that she stuttered over her words. You okay? You don't need to try and copy someone else. You should aim for your own original style. I think that's for the best. Yeah, you have a point. One should always aim high. You're right, I said, and Kuroha let out a sigh of relief. I never realized you cared so much about my originality. It brought a warmth to my heart. Afterward, we waited quietly until Odaira Sensei returned from the bathroom. But he was taking his time to appear. Oniai-chan, the author of Oniaka, only gained recognition after he died, right? Asked Kuroha, perhaps out of boredom. That's what I've heard, yes. Do you think what he was saying earlier about the pattern of the panties representing the state of Japan is actually true? Seems like he's reading too much into it to me. Kuroha, I began, in a surprisingly low voice. Odaira Sensei, I said it was so, yes? That the red of the panties was the color of the blood of his countrymen. If that is how he read it, then that is what it means. But something doesn't sound right about it. Do you have to question everything? You'll never make any friends this way. I worried about her. As her older brother, I wondered if she needed to be helped along the way to being a more trusting, open person. Just as I was about to admonish her, Odaira Sensei returned. He was no longer wearing panties on his head. Sorry I kept you waiting so long, he said, carrying a bundle of papers in his hand. I wonder what those are. You came on a good day. I was thinking I would let you read some of my brand new work. Brand new? Are you sure it's okay? Yes. It's still incomplete though, so only the opening section. Please allow me the honor. I'm going to be able to read Sensei's new work before the other 80 million citizens of Japan. I couldn't believe my amazing luck. For this work, I am writing a period piece, he said, sounding self-satisfied. A period piece? Yes. It takes place during the beginning of the 21st century, in the Heisei era. He sat down on the couch and handed me the first page of the manuscript. The Heisei era, it had been quite a peaceful time in Japan's history. Compared to the Showa era and Japan's participation in World War II, or the Meiji Restoration, it might even seem quite unremarkable. Of course, it wasn't as if nothing happened. There were natural disasters and economic downturns, but Japan had recovered quickly. For him to have chosen the Heisei era as the setting for his new work means that he wasn't going to rely on some famous historical incident or person, but instead wanted to really focus on the writing itself. I have a feeling this is going to be a masterpiece. With great anticipation, I looked down upon the manuscript. I'm late. Kiyoshi was in a hurry. He shouldn't have been watching videos on that website the entire night, he'd completely overslept. It was no good to be late on the first day of a new semester. He ran as fast as he could, taking a shortcut through a park and out onto the main road. That was when it happened. He ran into a girl who was running just like him. Kia. He saw her panties as she fell down. They were sky blue. Kiyoshi panicked and looked away. Ow. Are you okay? Kiyoshi asked, offering his hand. Oh, Oniai-chan, she said, looking shocked. What? Kiyoshi was an only child. He shouldn't have a little sister. It hurts, she said, patting her butt. It seemed like she had bumped it. I'll lick it for you, suggested Kiyoshi. If you lick something that hurts, that should make it better. No, thank you, she replied without hesitation. Kiyoshi was disappointed. He decided that he would have to settle for fantasizing about licking her butt. What is this? This was completely shocking to me. Sensei. He looked at me with sly smile, pleased with his prank. You can't be serious that this is your new work, right? After all, I can't read it. There were too many kanji. It wasn't just that the setting was during the Heisei era. This book was in fact written as a Heisei era novel would have been at the time. No one in current-day Japan could understand this. Fuahaha, perhaps I have gone too far. Did you write this yourself, Sensei? Of course. Amazing, I had heard that he was able to read kanji, but he can write them too? No normal author could write modern literature like that. His skills were on par with the best literary historians. How were you able to learn all the kanji, Sensei? I wanted to read some modern literature, so that's why I studied them. FYI, the first kanji I learned were body measurements. Shintai soka ti. I wonder what they mean? Just hearing him pronounce them makes my head hurt. You're going to write your next novel in the modern literature style. Oh, hardly. This is just me fooling around a bit. I was trying to get in the spirit of the period, and before I knew it my pen was writing modern literature. Oh, so that's what it is. I have the real one, here, he said, handing over another manuscript page. This time it looked like current-day literature. This was, without a doubt, Sensei's new work. You will be the first person to read it. Such an honor. I am not worthy. I was moved almost to tears, but I held them back for. Now was not the time. The time for crying would come afterward. With a feeling of great joy, I read the manuscript. Kamasan Kiyoshi, so late. Watch YouTube sleeps in dum-dum late day 1 onos. In park out. Hit girl Kabam Kiyoshi, UWA. Girl, Maya. Wawa fall roll panties Karari. Kira. Karari panties sky blue. Kiyobi shy. Girl, Oiowi. Kiyoshi, take hand please. Girl Bishaku. Girl, Oonaiken. Kiyoshi, wa. Kyoshi no sister, wise. Girl, OWOW. Girl bump rump pat pat. Kiyoshi, I licks it yes. Licks heels probs. Girl, nose. Kiyo Bido. Kiyo totes wants lick dreaming. But licky. Licky. I wasn't able to hold back my tears. I was the first person to read a work from Gyodaira. That alone was more than I could have dreamed, but the content itself was what truly moved me. Just the fact that it was a true and proper Odaira sensei work made me feel right at home. It was like nourishment taken in from the eyes. The little sister appears right from page 1, and without delay the oh so very literary staple, the panty flash. I was still reeling from the experience. This was orthodox style literature in its most pure form. What really stood out to me was the use of Karari, flash a light, instead of Karari, flash a peep. They had not yet invented self-defense glowing panties in the Heisei era, so it was not as if her panties had actually flashed. And yet, he had written it as if they had actually flashed. This was exactly what he had meant when he said that novels must describe. It must mean that the little sister must see the main character as a star of hope. Or perhaps, it could be some commentary about society. Yes, I was embarrassed to cry, but Odaira sensei had shown his feelings to me with this story more than any mere words could have expressed. So yes, I cried. I cried without inhibition. This is sensei's literature. Kieran. Panties sky blue, he said all of a sudden. What? That's the title of my new work. I replied, still in tears. Kieran. Panties sky blue. Profound. Perhaps this would be a more serious work than his previous books. I had that feeling just from reading the opening scene. This is how I truly felt. With this book, Odaira sensei will become truly godlike. Let me read it. While I was still shaking from emotion, Kuroha snatched the manuscript and began to read it. Kuroha, it's okay to cry. However, after she finished reading, I didn't notice any change. She was completely calm. I see it starts with a panty flash like many other books. Have you considered any other plot points? Kuroha-kun, are you asking me to not drink water? To not breathe the air? I don't believe that answers the question, but opening a novel with a panty flash is so crucial, you might as well have asked me those questions instead. If I don't start a book with a panty flash, I lack all motivation to continue to write. I should have known better than to ask. Kuroha, what is with that reaction of yours? This is terrible. At this rate you are going to grow up into an emotionless adult. I had made up my mind. On the train ride home I would teach Kuroha about the wonders of Gyodaira literature. I would tell her in detail about every book. I think I'll start with teaching her the pattern on the panties of each of his heroines. Entry May 1st, 2202. It is not my wont to speak overly of myself to others. But oh, do I so deplore this world. Every person has someone or something for which they live their lives. As for myself, it is literature. Even from a young age, my toys were letters, and from the time I could tell them apart, I preferred the pen to the chopstick. I believed, like my ancestor Torihiko Toji, that I would soon give to the world beautiful works of literature. With my gifts as a writer, it should have been no difficulty whatsoever. But Japanese literature is dead. Though I knew the horrendous state of literature, somewhere deep in my heart I believed that the spark of proper literature still burned somewhere in this country. I trusted in the goodness of the Japanese people. Clutching to this final grain of hope, I ventured to a bookstore. It was my objective to check the nominations for the most prestigious literary award in Japan. Even just a tiny glimpse, all I wanted to see was some sign or signal of another who agreed with me. Gyodaira, Lilsa's star. Haruka Haruka, my little sister can't go to the bathroom alone. Neshisama, Anidaruma. Top of top, magnificent. An encyclopedia of prepubescent girls. Saku Kogure, Yusabai. Yes, I had read them all. But all that they left in my heart was despair. I could hardly stand reading any of them. They are worth less than dust. Such pinnacles of vulgarity. Only Yusabai had taken a different direction, but it was still a far cry from the literature I so longed for. I have come to a realization. There is no place in this literary world for me. The literature my ancestor Torihiko had written that stretched from the Meiji era to the Taisho era has been destroyed. The beautiful prose, the grand stories, all have vanished. The Japanese people have fallen into depravity, their words have been snuffed out, their culture gone rotten. Yes, and this all began long, long ago. I can but drown my sorrows in sake, shedding tears for what has been lost. Chapter 2: The Heisei Exhibit. It had been a month since I had met Odaira Sensei. After that experience, I had finished writing my novel and submitted it for the Newcomer's Prize. It was my 5th entry. Like Oniaka had once done for me, my desire was that my novels would move a great number of readers' hearts. That it would give many people hope. And ever since I had met Odaira Sensei, that wish had grown even stronger. By exchanging emails, we had become friends. I was so glad that he would always respond, despite being such a busy man. The emails were mostly about my younger little sister, Miru. He would ask me about her likes and dislikes, her measurements, how often she wet the bed, detailed questions like that. I was happy to help him with such research for creating new characters. He was very insistent about meeting Miru. I would have brought Miru to see him sooner, but he never seemed to have an opening in his busy schedule. He wasn't just writing novels, he also maintained a full slate of interviews and lectures. He had resigned himself to not being able to meet her for a little while, but then he pulled a lot of strings and managed to open up an entire day for us. I can't stand it anymore, he'd said. And so, walking beside me to the nearest train station was a little girl, my youngest sister Miru. Next to her walked Kuroha. With Miru in the middle, we made the shape of the Kanji. The 3 of us were heading to Tokyo. I had promised to bring Miru to see Odaira Sensei the last time we'd met. The day to fulfill that promise had finally come. Kuroha had complained, I just said that to get you out of a jam, and made a fuss, but it wasn't as if I could betray my promise. Today, we were not just going to visit his home. He had said he would give us a tour of a history museum he recommended. I might be able to get some inspiration for my novels from history. I can't wait. It was all thanks to Miru that I would be able to meet Odaira Sensei once again. I looked over in her direction. Miru was a 4th grader in elementary school, and 10 years old. She was normal height for someone her age, her head reaching up to the center of my stomach. She had on a cat-eared beret that she was fond of, and was wearing a one-piece dress, with a little bag hung across her shoulder. Her face, as you might expect, resembled that of her sister Kuroha. She had a cool expression on her face, and her eyes and nose were mounted precisely in position. She'll be quite the beauty when she grows up. Miru was also reading a book as we walked. "Miro, that's dangerous," cautioned Kuroha, but Miro paid her no attention, absorbed in her book. Looking at the cover, there was a picture of a woman. The book was titled Collection of Light Novel Covers. Light novels were one of the genres of modern literature. It was said that they influenced the orthodox literary style. It must have been a collection of the cover illustrations for those books. I'd seen them in my art history classes. Miro asked Kuroha a question without even looking up. "Hey, what does Jutsu melancholy mean?" "It means when you feel down in the dumps." "And Shikanju summoned beast?" Like an animal you call out, maybe?" "And what's Daimyo Demon King? The leader of the bad guys or something?" Mira kept asking Kuroha questions, and not looking particularly satisfied with the answers. It seemed like she was reading the kanji written on the cover illustrations. Mira might have been only 10 years old, but she could read a lot of kanji already. She picked them up even faster than Kuroha, who was called a child prodigy. The Amos family had produced generations of linguists and translators, but Mira's ability with language rivaled that of her greatest ancestors. And she wasn't just a genius at words, but at drawing as well. As an example, if you were to ask her to draw pictures of characters like the cover illustrations she was looking at, she would be able to without any trouble at all. I almost feared what she might become. On the other hand, there was myself. I could not read kanji. I could not even keep up with my sister's conversation. I was a mere commoner. I had frustratingly attempted to learn kanji many times. But it was like they were a completely different language to me. How in the world is someone supposed to memorize not hundreds, but thousands of symbols? Only a true genius would be able to read and write them. I did not have the blood of the Amos family running through me. The brain I had been born with was just too different from that of my sister's. Not being able to read kanji posed no problems for my daily life. But knowing so vividly that I was unrelated to my sisters pained me, and made me feel distant. "Anhh, what's the matter? You're making a scary face." It seemed like I had gone off into my own little world, and I had a stern look on my face which Mira was now staring at. Sorry. Got dumped by a girl? What's with that all of a sudden?" Mira seemed to take my stunned silence as an affirmative answer. "I'll strangle the bitch," she said coolly. Mira was innocent, but had a foul mouth. "Miro, stop that," Kuroha scolded. "Aren't you curious, nay?" There's no way he was dumped or picked up for that matter. That's not in the cards for him. As it was the truth, I had no rebuttal. "Don't feel sorry for yourself, Anhh, I'll give you a treat." Mira reached into her bag, pulled out a round, white object, and handed it to me. It was a marshmallow. "Here's one for you," she said, handing another one to Kuroha. Mira loved marshmallows. She always carried some around with her. She never kept them all to herself, and was always giving them to other people to eat. She's such a kind girl. "We'll eat them on the train," I said. It was a journey of 20 minutes from the closest station to our house to reach Tokyo. A long time ago, it would have taken the bullet train 2 hours, but in the current day, it only took a fraction of the time. Like the time it would take us all to eat marshmallows, we would be there in a jiffy. Odaira Sensei had said he would meet us at the entrance to the History Museum. The museum was in the center of a large park. It was a grand, historical building that was said to have been built more than 200 years ago, and many visitors were there. So where might he be? I peered around, searching for him. Oh, there he is. Odaira Sensei was wearing a brimmed hat and holding a walking stick. He looked like a proper English gentleman. Also, he was holding a white flag in his hand. He had said he would be holding some sort of sign. I see now. That's easy to recognize. On the flag was written, "Your Oni-chan is Coco here." Your Oni-chan is something? It must have been a message meant for my sisters, who could read kanji. It made me sad that he didn't take me into consideration. Maybe we could pretend that we don't know him, said Kuroha, sounding disgusted. Why would we pretend we didn't know him? Is she feeling bashful all of a sudden? Sensei, I yelled, waving my hand. He noticed, flung aside the flag, and headed toward us. As I was about to greet him, he blew right past me as if I were not even there. He stopped behind me to stand in front of my sister Miru. Yuo, oh, Yuo, he managed only a groan. Miru stood there with her mouth half open in disbelief, looking up at him. Who is this geezer? Miru calling him a geezer is rude. I started to panic, but he didn't seem to mind. Miru-chan, you're right in the middle, he said. If you just had twin tails, you'd be smack dab in the middle. Kuroha, what is she in the middle of, do you think? I asked in a whisper. I'd rather not put it into words, she replied, looking intently at Odaira-sensei. I wasn't exactly sure what he was talking about, but knowing him, it must have been something literary. Miru-chan, let's go inside, he cried, trying to grab her hand. Shove it, she said, slapping it away irritatedly. What do you think you're doing? I started to panic even more and was about to apologize, but rather than getting angry, he seemed pleased. Miru-chan, what a delight you are. Like a surly little kitten. Perhaps he was getting excited, as his face began to turn red. Say more mean things to me. I just love making icy little girls fall for me. He proclaimed, his body quivering slightly, with his stomach stuck out. And now, Miru-chan, call me Onii-chan. And then I shall act coldly to you. Yes, I shall act coldly as I am called Onii-chan by a little sister who says mean things to me. I can't get enough of that. Miru looked up at him with a displeased expression. Perhaps she was suddenly curious, as she jabbed him in the stomach like pressing a button. Yes, this is it. I'm gonna overflow. It's all gonna come out. His eyes rolled to the back of his head, and his tongue was hanging out of his mouth. That's quite a face he's making. It looked almost like steam was going to come out of his eyes and nose. Did he mean water vapor was going to overflow? Onii-chan, wait here for a second, said Kuroha as she watched Odaira-sensei and Miru. With a frozen expression, she headed toward the security guard station. After a bit, she returned with a number of security guards, and they took Odaira-sensei away. Kuroha-sensei was taken to the security station. Yeah, I didn't anticipate he was at such a level. Such a level? I don't know what you mean. Oh, I get it now. A person as famous as Odaira-sensei would cause a large commotion, with all the people asking for his signature. So it must have been safer for him to stay in the security station. I guess being famous isn't such a great thing all the time. I had wanted to visit the museum with the professor like Odaira-sensei, but considering the circumstances, it couldn't be helped. We decided to go around on our own. Miru, I'm really sorry. This is because I told him we'd bring you to meet him. I bet you were scared. Kuroha consoled her. Nah, he was a funny old coot. May he rest in peace. I'm pretty sure he's not dying anytime soon. We entered the museum. It seemed there was currently a Heisei exhibit on display. Odaira-sensei's latest work was set in the Heisei era, so perhaps there was a bit of a Heisei boom going on in the world. We started going around the first floor. It started with a corner that showcased the people's lifestyle in the Heisei era. In the middle of the floor was a platform surrounded by glass, and inside was a full-sized recreation of a normal household room. On a plaque was written Peep's Room. In the middle of the room stood an approximately 20-year-old young man with glasses. I guess he lives in this room? It seems like this figure had been recreated from the data of an actual person. Wow, said Miru, pressing her forehead up to the glass and taking it all in. Indeed, it was impressive. He seemed completely real. They must have used the latest techniques in robotics engineering, as he didn't look like a mannequin at all. He looked like a flesh and blood human being. The furnishings were also impeccably crafted and looked authentic. Doesn't seem that different from today, said Kuroha, impressed. It was true. The layout of the room and the clothes the young man was wearing seemed surprisingly not that old-fashioned. "Nii, there's all kinds of stuff," said Miro, pointing to the center of the room. There were many figures of girls, books with girls on the cover, and boxes with illustrations of girls on them. All the illustrations were of girls. "What's that?" asked Miro, pointing to the wall. An illustration was hung there. How very like Miro to be interested in pictures. It was a full-body illustration of a girl. There's a ring above her head, so it must be a drawing of an angel. Around her body was wrapped what looked like the legs of an octopus. The tentacles seemed like they were squeezing tight, and the girl's expression was like she was in pain. Jinriru, the devil angel, was written on it, and I could read the Jiriru part, but the rest was written in kanji. Tentacles squeezing an angel? There could be no mistaking it. This illustration was a religious painting. I gasped. It was a picture of an angel, so that was what it must have been. The person who lived in this room was a very devout Christian, I see. Japan must have been deeply religious in this era. Oh, nodded Miro in understanding. Is that really what it is? Asked Kuroha, doubtfully. I'm pretty sure I'm right about this one. The figures on the shelves are clearly in the image of the Holy Mother Mary, I told her. There were dozens of figures lined up. Are you sure that Mary would be holding a guitar, or an axe, or wearing what I'm pretty sure is a school swimsuit? Asked Kuroha, with a chilly look. It's from like 200 years ago. That might look like a school swimsuit, but it's something different. It could be the garb of a devout Christian. Kuroha stifled a laugh. Hey, are you making fun of me? I was about to give her a piece of my mind when Mira pulled on her skirt. Nay, look at that, she said, pointing at the boxes strewn over the floor. The boxes had text as well as illustrations printed on them. Thomas the Chicken Molester was written on it, but all I could make out was Thomas. Nay, what does chicken mean? Miro asked. What? Yelped Kuroha in a high-pitched voice. Chicken was an old-fashioned word. I had heard the term before, but I wasn't sure what it meant. What is it? Miro asked. Well, it's... Tell me. Kuroha seemed in a bind, but then her expression got serious, and she proclaimed to Miro, watch closely. What is she getting at? Kuroha moved closer to me and gestured twice as if she were rubbing my butt. Miro, do you understand? This is what a chicken is. Will she really understand the meaning like this? I don't have a clue what she's talking about. Miro looked back and forth between us, and said calmly. Nay, that's called being a chijo molstress. How do you know what chijo means but not chicken? Kuroha shrieked. Mom and Dad taught me. Mom and Dad aren't that open about such things. Miro, you're just teasing me, aren't you? What in the world does chijo mean? And what exactly did Mom and Dad teach her? Well, I'd better play along. Oh, I think I get it. Mom is a chijo, right? She's young and pretty, so that's really chijo, why, definitely. And she must have a lot of chijo friends, too. Miro, write in your elementary school yearbook that you want to be a chijo when you grow up. For some reason, Kuroha was not pleased. She gave me a death glare. Miro must have lost interest in learning what chicken meant, as she began looking around the room for something else interesting. Nay, what about that? What is this now? Kuroha asked. There was an old-fashioned PC where Miro was looking. Something was being displayed on the monitor. There was an illustration of a girl in the middle of the screen, and there was text displayed below, written in both kanji and hiragana. Below that, written in English, were the words log, save, and skip. Is this a screen from an old game, maybe? Nay, can you also read the words? Miro asked. Yeah, said Kuroha, looking at the PC screen. It seemed like she was reading the text. What is this? Said Kuroha, her face in disbelief. What in the world does it say? I also tried to read the display note. Can't understand a thing. You should lose your duty virginity to me, your little sister. Nay, what does duty mean? Oh, not this again, said a flustered Kuroha. Duty it rings a bell, and yet it doesn't ring a bell. It must have been a word that had gone out of favor, like chikan. Tell me, cried Miru, tilting her head to one side. Kuroha seemed to waver. Perhaps she doesn't know what it means. If you don't know, just say so already. Kuroha pointed at me and said, You're one, Oniai-chan. Huh? I replied, dumbfounded. Well, it's true, isn't it, Oniai-chan? I don't really understand. You've just got to be one, Oniai-chan. I'd bet my entire allowance on it. Well, if you put it that way. If you say so, nay, then I'll believe you. You're always watching him real close. I see. Well, then I guess I must be a duty I said. Understood. Miru nodded in agreement. What exactly does she understand? It means you're kind and cool, said Miru. What a nice thing to say. And yet, I had a strange feeling something was off. But then why should I lose it? Wouldn't it be better to keep it? You should really stop digging, said Kuroha, shaking her head. I knew it, she really didn't know what it meant. Miru seemed to have lost interest in the room recreation, and she started walking to another part of the exhibit. She was a very precocious child. Kuroha looked at the PC screen again, rereading the text. Was this stuff really so common back then? What do you mean by this stuff? Never mind, Kuroha replied, averting her eyes, her face looking slightly flushed. She was staring intently at the young man's figurines, as if to avoid looking at me. Was the person who lived in this room really a typical person of that era? That's what it says on the exhibit description, so it must be true. We headed to the next floor. Important cultural artifacts were on display inside glass cases. So cute, exclaimed Miru with joy. Inside the display case were hung what looked like pieces of fabric. Each one had a picture of a human figure on it. Most of them were of women facing forward, although there were a few men here and there. What are these pieces of fabric? Let's read the description. Ah, they're hugging pillow covers. Hugging pillow covers were a type of bedding which were produced heavily in the Heisei era. As the name implied, hugging pillow covers were covers for long pillows with character illustrations on both sides. From what I knew, all normal people of that time had them. I do have to give the people of the past credit for their inventiveness. It was quite an idea, said Kuroha. Yes, definitely, I agreed. Are they no longer made? She wondered. I've heard that there are still some artisans who practice the ancient craft in the old parts of town. Odaira Sensei special ordered some made of his little sisters. He says that he sleeps with a different one of them each night. Oh, and he wants to make one of Miru. Kuroha stood there, aghast. I want one of you, Nii, said Miru, looking up at me. I want to sleep together with you, Nii. In that case, you don't need a pillow cover, because you have the real me. If you want to sleep together, that's fine by. Stomp. Suddenly I felt a sharp pain in my foot. Oniai-chan. Kuroha shouted. She had just stomped on my foot. What's with you all of a sudden? As I was still reeling from the pain, Kuroha leaned in and put her lips to my ear. Look, Miru just loves you as her real brother, got it? Don't be getting any ideas. Yeah, I know that, I said in puzzlement. Unlike Kuroha, Miru didn't know that I was adopted. She thought that I was her real, blood-related brother. And besides, in our family boys and girls sleep in different rooms starting in elementary school, Kuroha insisted. I get it already. Sheesh. I used to sleep in the same room with Mom and Kuroha, but when I'd entered elementary school, I had gotten my own room. Back then, it was Kuroha who had seemed sad about it. I was just thinking that it wouldn't be so bad to sleep together with Miru once in a while, is all. Not even once in a while. What would you do if something happened? Something? Nay, please don't fight. Here, have some marshmallows, said Miru, calming us down. She opened up her bag, and was searching around, probably to take out some marshmallows. Kuroha, you totally overreacted. Eat some marshmallows and calm down. After that, we went to look around the other floors of the exhibit. I thought it was very fulfilling to experience the culture of the Heisei era. After viewing many displays, we finally approached the last floor. Ooh, I said, unable to stop myself. In the middle of the floor, a gigantic portrait of a young woman was on display. She had dazzling blonde hair and clear blue eyes. Unbelievably for an Oriental person, her white skin almost had tinges of pink. The black Katyusha headband she was wearing on her head lent her an air of an antique Russian doll. Homura Taiti. She was the heroine of the classic book I Want to Have Onii-chan's Baby. She was probably the most famous 2D character in Japan. This portrait was more realistic than the book's illustrations. I guess you could call it Homura, real version. She's so pretty, said Miru, drawn to the portrait. Yeah, she really is pretty, Kuroha agreed. I took a good look. I had not told anyone, but my first love had been, in fact, Homura. When I had read Oniaka in elementary school, my young heart had yearned for Homura. That was when I had awakened to the joys of the opposite sex. Now though, I wouldn't go so far as to describe my feelings that way. Homura was a 2D character. Unfortunately, nothing would come of falling in love with her. But that did not change the fact that she was a very special heroine to me. I was overjoyed to be able to view such a huge portrait of my special Homura. But isn't there something odd about this? I craned my neck. Oniaka was written quite a while after the Heisei era. It's a stretch to display a portrait of her in a Heisei exhibition. There's an explanation written here, said Kuroha. Let's see. Yes, indeed, said a sober voice from behind us. I turned around, and there was Odaira Sensei. Sensei, are you sure it's safe? I asked. Yes, I gave them the slip, he said proudly. For my young friends, overcoming a few security guards is a small order. Kuroha, with a defensive look on her face, pulled Miru away from him. Ah, yes, you wanted to know why this picture was here. It is said that Homura was a real person. I was surprised. I had thought that Oniaka was entirely a work of fiction. Oh, perhaps that is an inaccurate way of putting it. Homura was not a real person, but rather there is a real person who served as her model. Lately, the theory that she was based on a person from the Heisei era has come into favor. This was all new to me. I had known that Homura was based off someone. But I had always assumed the model had been a girl from the year 2060, when Oniaka had been published. I had never heard before that her model had been from the Heisei era. That is why I believe there is this large portrait of Homura here in this Heisei exhibit, finished Odaira Sensei, shrugging his shoulders. After finishing with the museum, we headed back to Odaira Sensei's house. We ate dinner, and afterward retired to the living room, sitting around the low table. Odaira Sensei brewed coffee and tea for us. It was an after-dinner tea time. To go with the tea and snacks, Odaira Sensei brought out a plate of marshmallows he said he had received as a gift from an acquaintance. The marshmallows were squishy and chewy, and melted into sweetness in our mouths. These are delicious, proclaimed Miru. You like marshmallows, right, Miru-chan? He cooed. Feel free to take them home with you. They're special marshmallows that a friend of mine made. Thanks, geezer. Odaira Sensei handed over a gift bag to Miru, and she placed it carefully in her pack. Miru-chan, who has skin white like marshmallows, is eating marshmallows. It's like cannibalism. So exciting, he said. Your decrepitude knows no bounds, sneered Kuroha, which almost made me break out in a cold sweat, but Odaira-sensei was so absorbed with Miiro that he didn't seem to notice one bit. We ate our fill of marshmallows and relaxed. I looked through the window, and it was already completely dark outside. The clock showed that it was already 8 p.m. I was beginning to think that it was time to take our leave when Odaira-sensei asked me a new question. What did you think of the Heisei exhibit, Jin-kun? It really left an impression on me, I said. I never knew that the people of that era were so religious. Oh, religious, you say? Yes. Seeing all those holy figures and pictures in the recreation of that room was quite an eye-opener. Ha ha ha, laughed Odaira-sensei. Holy, you call them? That's an excellent way of putting it. They are very much a matter of devotion, that's true, he said, nodding in agreement. See, I knew I was right about that. And what about you, Kuroha-kun? He asked. Well, I had heard that in the Heisei era, there weren't any wars, and the people's minds were at ease. If I had been born into that era, maybe I would be a kinder person. Oh ho, he said. I wish I could see it with my own eyes, she continued. Yeah, that would be nice, I agreed. You want to go see it too, Miiro? Asked Kuroha. Fue? Perhaps Miiro was tired, as she was lying with one cheek on the table, and looked like she was dozing off. It didn't seem like she had heard Kuroha. I'd better follow up for her. Your sister said that she wanted to go to the Heisei era. My mind was filled with thoughts of that ancient era. Yes, today was a good day. I have a feeling I've charged up enough energy to write a new novel. Sensei, thank you so much. Miiro looked like she was about to doze off, so I decided it was time for us to go. Kuroha, we can't stay too late, I began. Then it started. Something strange. The first person it happened to was Miiro. Pippi, Pippi, a sound like an alarm started coming from Miro's body. At first I thought her cell phone was broken, but that wasn't it. Miro's body itself began to blink in and out. She looked at her own body in disbelief. The rest of us were also stunned into silence. Next, Kuroha and Odaira-sensei also began to blink. The sound of an alarm made a chorus from their three bodies. Finally, it was my turn. What's going on? Asked Kuroha, frightened. Our flashing got faster and faster, and the pip-pip-pip-pip sound of the alarm grew more and more rapid until it merged into one long tone. What is this? What's happening to us? Anhh, cried Miiro, as if she had been driven into a corner. There was a whooshing sound. Before I had the chance to think, it was already too late. Miiro had vanished. Miiro, cried Kuroha. I could do nothing but stare soundlessly. With another whooshing sound like a cutting wind, Odaira-sensei disappeared. Oniai-chan, Kuroha looked at me almost in tears. Kuroha, I cried, reaching out to grab her hand, and she reached out in return. Just as our hands were about to touch, Kuroha disappeared. I was left alone. Where could the three of them have disappeared to? This isn't some game of hide and seek, right? Then I felt a sensation like someone pulling the hair on the back of my head. I lost consciousness and blacked out. Chan. Oniai-chan. Someone was shaking my body. Wake up, Oniai-chan. The voice belonged to Kuroha. I groaned, opened my eyes, and sat up. Kuroha was right in front of me. She was so close, I thought our lips might touch each other by accident. Kaya, yelped Kuroha in a girly way. Be careful. Oh, sorry, I mumbled. Nii. Someone came running to give me a hug. She rammed into me at full speed. It was Miiro. You're awake, Nii. Miiro was burying her face in mine. stomach. Perhaps it was because of my unease, but I hugged her tight and didn't want to let go. I'm sorry for worrying you. I gently let her go and patted the top of her head. You wouldn't wake up there for a while, said Kuroha. Do you think you're all in one piece? I slowly moved away from Miru and checked myself for any injuries. I stretched my legs, flexed my shoulders, and rolled my neck around a bit. It seemed like Kuroha and Miru were also fine. Knowing we were physically okay was a small relief, even in such a tough situation. Wait, what happened to there was someone missing? Where is Sensei? He's not here, Kuroha said. Maybe he woke up before we did and headed off somewhere. Kuroha shook her head in response without saying anything. Has he gone missing? Sensei, please be safe. I was worried about him, but the first order of business was to figure out where we were. I looked around. The first thing I noticed was the change in the time of day. Even though the sun had completely gone down after we had finished dinner, it was now high in the sky as if it were noon. We were also in a completely different place. I thought I smelled grass, and indeed we were laying on a wide lawn. This was definitely not Odaira Sensei's house. Maybe some kind of park? Some tens of meters away from us was an old-looking Western-style house. Other than that, I couldn't see any other buildings, just a line of trees surrounding the lawn. Where are we? I asked. I don't know, replied Kuroha. Why don't we check our cell phones to find out? The GPS should have been able to tell us our location. I took out my cell phone from my pocket, but the display was completely blank. I thought that it might have gotten turned off, so I pressed the power button. This is odd. It's not turning on. I guess yours doesn't work either, Oniai-chan, Kuroha said. Which means I gathered that Kuroha's phone was equally useless. What about Mira's cell phone? Nope. Well, now we're in a pickle. We had no idea where we were, and no way of contacting Odaira Sensei. I was at a loss for what to do. Isn't there something I know? Let's ask someone at that house if we can borrow their phone. I pointed at the house I had seen. It had a triangular roof, and there was a weather vane on the top. It looked like an ancient Western-style building. Although it doesn't seem to be a normal house, it should at least have a phone. That sounds like a better plan than just flailing about. Agreed Kuroha. We headed together to the entrance of the Western house. It was surrounded by a wooden fence, and there was a gate in front. We passed through the gate onto the grounds of the house. This is a big mansion. It seemed even larger closer up. The door at the entrance opened with a creak, and a person came out from inside. A young woman. Her blonde hair sparkled in the bright sunlight. She was wearing a black katyusha on her head. It looked like a blossom of darkness that contrasted wonderfully with her bright hair. When I looked down at her figure, she was wearing a white apron and holding a broom. Maybe she's a house servant? She looked at me. My heart stopped. My heart didn't actually stop, of course. That was a figure of speech. But it is true that it might have really stopped for a few seconds. That was just how surprised I was. Why? Because this girl resembled her just so perfectly. Homura, exclaimed Mira from behind me. Homura Taiti. The girl in the painting we had seen just hours earlier was standing before us. The Homura clone looked at us intently and smiled. It was such a kind smile, I was taken aback. Hello. Her intonation was slightly unusual, but I could understand exactly what Ms. Clone said. A hello, I managed. Oh my, her gaze went past me. She was looking at Mira's hat. What a cute hat. She must be Mira-chan, right? Color me shocked. How could she know Mira's name? Yes, that's right, I said. Then you must be her friends, she beamed. I had no idea what she was talking about. Whose friends were we supposed to be, exactly? Still bewildered, we all paid our thanks to Ms. Clone. "Welcome, guests," she said cheerfully. We raised our heads up slowly, and were met with a shocking revelation. "Welcome to the 21st century. My great and most honorable ancestor wrote under the name Torihiko Toji. From the Meiji era through the Taisho era, he left us many classic works of literature. His work was well respected up until the Heisei era, but afterward, with the sudden rise of the orthodox style of literature, oh, how I loathe the term with all of my being, he disappeared from the memories of readers. Records still barely exist of him, but his works are now considered mothballed old relics of no value. I can barely contain my furor over the hideous way the world treats my great ancestors' writings, but some of the responsibility for failing to protect his good name lies with my own family. In our house, we have kept preserved the diary of Torihiko's grandson, Takeono. In this diary is clearly documented our family distancing itself from literature during the Showa to the Heisei era. April 5th, Showa 58, Wednesday, rainy. It seems as if my son has been creating an independent magazine, a doujinshi. In my student years, I also was in charge of the literary magazine, so I thought I would be proud of my son for finally awakening to literature, but something is not right here. When I asked him to show me what he was writing, he pulled out a thin book. It was indie, that is true, but the content was a fan work based off an animated character. With an illustration of a pink-haired girl on the cover, he told me her name was Momo, or Yuami, or something like that. It seems like he will be selling this book at an exhibition center at the Harumi area in Tokyo. There will be some sort of doujinshi sales event there. It is a world that I do not understand, and it confuses me completely. Although it pains me to say it, it does not look like my son will become a literary person like grandfather Torihiko. March 5th, Heisei 21, Saturday, sunny. My grandson has been awarded the Newcomer's Prize, and has become an author. It is a thing to celebrate, but when I asked him whether his work tended toward the Akutagawa Prize, or the Naoki Prize, he replied coarsely, "It's not like those at all." Upon further prying, it seems like he is writing something called light novels, which are targeted toward younger readers. My grandson wanted to become a manga artist, but he was not talented at drawing, and settled for being an author, it seems. Even after becoming an author, he still hasn't gotten over it, and I think he shows off his art on some site called Pixie, or Pixar, or something. I was angry, yes, for the low amount of mind he paid the literary field, but seeing him enjoying himself was enough, in the end, to satisfy me. Nothing is more important than the happiness of your family, after all. The resignation had already begun to sink in. Even with such a great ancestor as Torihiko Toji, his sons were swept away by the changing times. What a pity. How he must be full of regrets and gnashing his teeth. Rather than fight it, our family welcomed the long winter. Not a one awakened to proper literature, and we all became cut off from our ancestors' work. But then, I was born. I shall not cater myself to this era. I will fight with all my being to bring back the literature of my ancestors. Witness me from the afterlife, so that you may rest in peace. Chapter 3: Expectations and Reality. Welcome to the 21st century. Those were the words Ms. Clone had spoken. I thought about what they might mean. Well, they mean what they mean, right? What in the world is this? The question was asked not by me, but by my sister Kuroha. She moved in front of me, almost... That's not what I was asking. You just said, welcome to the 21st century, but the year is 2202. Traveled through time? Here, look at this, she continued, taking a boxy cell phone out of her apron. It looked like it had a very old-fashioned design. This is today's date. That explains it. I nodded. It seemed like we had traveled back in time. Onie-chan, you're just going to believe it so easily? Exclaimed Kuroha, approaching me with an exasperated expression. Why shouldn't I believe it? That's what the date says, right? Come on, you can easily change the date on a phone. Kuroha cried. Oh, you can? Yuzu-san asked with a surprised look on her face. She stared intently at the phone and happily announced, you learn something new every day. Besides, how does she know that we traveled through time? Isn't this the first time we've met? Kuroha asked me, but Yuzu-san was the one who responded. The person who came here earlier told me about you. The person who came earlier? Who was that? Asked Kuroha. Odaira-san. Odaira? I ran up to Yuzu-san. You know where Sensei is? I asked, raising my voice despite myself. Sensei for someone that young to be called Sensei. They must be really impressive. Someone that young? She must have met someone so young at heart. Sensei's sensibilities were always so young and fresh, after all. Odaira-san said there were 3 others, and showed me pictures, continued Yuzu-san. Odaira-sensei must have shown Yuzu-san photographs of us. But I didn't recall ever giving him any pictures. Pictures of us? I repeated. No, just pictures of Miii-chan, replied Yuzu-san. Odaira-san said this is my special friend Miii-chan, and showed me a bunch of pictures really happily. Were those pictures taken with her facing the camera? Asked Kuroha, emitting a dangerous aura. Now that you mention it, she wasn't looking at the camera in any of them. When did he? Cried Kuroha, the veins popping out on her temples. Where did Sensei go? I asked, and Yuzu-san turned to look at the house. Just then, the front door opened, and a blonde-haired little girl appeared from inside. She looked to be about 10 years old. She must be the same age as Miru. She was cute and puffed out her cheeks. Her hair was tied up with 2 ribbons, and hung down on either sides of her face. In other words, she had twin tails. She was wearing a frilly black one-piece dress that looked more like a costume out of an anime. Ah, Oniai-sama, said the girl when she saw me, in a pretty voice, her eyes looking up at me mistily. Oniai-sama? I was pretty sure I had never met her before. Oniai-sama, you came for me, didn't you? She continued. Huh? I was confused. As long you have me, you don't need any other little sisters, the girl began, but Miru cut her off. Who the hell are you? Miru demanded, as if speaking to an enemy. The cat ears on her beret usually flopped down, but they were now standing up rigid and tall. It was like she was trying to intimidate the other girl. The little girl turned to look at Miru. And as she did, her eyes turned to a loving gaze. Ah, I was just making a joke, Miru-chan, said the girl, putting her hands on her hips and puffing out her chest. It's me, she announced. Her attitude rang a bell in my head. Wait, could that be? But such a thing was ridiculous to even consider. Are you Odaira-sensei? Asked Kuroha, saying what I didn't dare to. The girl spun around, closed her eyes, and said, bingo. I've become a blonde, twin-tailed, beautiful little girl. This was a level beyond shocking. It was astonishing beyond belief. A 70-year-old gentleman had been transformed into an adorable little girl. His instincts for his profession are at a whole other level. In order to write the most realistic young girls, Odaira-sensei had overcome even the boundaries of age and gender. Sensei, you are truly impressive. Geezer, how'd you pull this trick? Asked Miru. When I came to, this is how I was, Miru-chan. I bet you have even more appreciation for me now, yes? No, you're creepy. Miru-chan, I hope you never change. Hearing the two of them go back and forth made it all the more clear it was him. I went to get